1960s. And when I worked for President Clinton as his Director of Defense Policy, and Slovakia had become an independent country after the communist era, they had their foreign minister come over, and his name was Sestak.
No.
So Al Gore was going to meet him as the vice president, and they said, "We got Sestak, we'll have him meet him." So we got one too. So I was standing there with him waiting to meet, and the foreign minister comes up, and the vice president introduces me, and the foreign minister goes, "Sestak, that's like Smith in America." This is John, and he'll just point this out. John, why don't you just give it to the top two here, and they'll pass them down for you. Eric, thank you for letting me speak a little bit, take questions at the end. I wore the cloth of our country, as some of you may know, for 31 years, in war and in peace. I was in the Navy like my father was during World War II. When we're ashore, the Navy tends to invest in you, because you're not at sea, so you should be something worthwhile. So they initially sent me off to Harvard University to get a doctorate in both economics and government. So whenever I came ashore, I would work in a policy position, such as for President Clinton. I was his director for defense policy in the White House for 3 years. At sea, I had various rising command positions. I was on the ground in Afghanistan shortly after the war began. I headed the Navy's strategic anti-terrorism unit. And it was a very brief period I was there. When I came out, I was given command of an aircraft carrier battle group for the strikes against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. But when I came home, my 4-year-old daughter, and I got married late in life at 47, and she was wheeled out of surgery. The doctors told us that they couldn't get a brain cancer. And when we asked them what it meant, they said, "We think it's glioblastoma." It's the one that John McCain and Ted Kennedy. No adult has ever survived, and only 8% of children have. But your health care plan, because they couldn't get it in the military hospital, total resection, permitted us to take her elsewhere. And she survived. My payback tour to my country was leaving the Navy, was to run as a Democrat in a nearly 2-to-1 Republican district. I had been an independent in the military, as I think everyone should be there. And I won. 2 years later, I won again. And I won by 20 points. And I didn't spend a penny of the $3 million I raised on a campaign ad. I had an F from the NRA, 100% from the National Organization of Women, 95% from the Human Rights Campaign, and 100% from NARAL, pro-choice. We agreed on things, but where we didn't, we learned to disagree well. And I'll come back to that, because when my daughter's brain cancer came back last year, I was out of government. I was about to take another job in cybersecurity, because I had started the portfolio for that in the Clinton administration, National Security Council. Well, most of us didn't even know how to spell cyber. But I stayed there as my wife continued to work. She's an international environmentalist, works in Africa and other places. And I started to think, as she went through her radiation again and the brain operation and a new type of drug, that if she made it to a safe shelter again, I would run again. But the story I tell people now, as she got in the safe shelter in June, and I got in only some weeks ago, is one that if you come aboard that aircraft carrier that I had in my command carrier battle, I tell people there's 5,000 sailors on that carrier alone, and their average age is 19 and a half. If you don't think the youth of America are great, come aboard. But one of the things I saw there was, as I commanded it, was what this nation most wants and most needs. And what a young man, 19 and a half years old, or a young woman teaches you, teaches us on that carrier. When a pilot gets in a plane, they turned on their engine. Then they strap the plane into a catapult. They hook it in. And then that pilot releases the brake. and then they push a button. Off you go into the dark of the night. And if your engines work, it's the best ride you'll ever have. Sometimes they say, stop, change the plane out. It doesn't happen that often because it's a very dangerous procedure. So what occurs is a young man or woman comes out on that carrier deck. And in the dark of the night, they go under the belly of the plane. And the pilot can't see down there. So after they unhook it, because that pilot has now their brakes on, and they don't want to turn off their engines until they know they've been unhooked. Because they don't want to turn off their engines, be hooked up, and someone by mistake pushes the button. And it's a good ride, but it's your final one. So that young man and woman goes to the front of the plane, not the side, and looks up at the pilot and gives this signal. And then doesn't move until that pilot has shut off his or her engine, opened up that canopy, and gotten safely on the deck. That pilot has said everything our nation most wants today. What it most yearns for today. What it most needs today. When that pilot is told by that young man or woman, go ahead, pilot, you can trust me because I'm going to stand right here. It's not my word, it's my deed that you can trust. Because if I made a mistake and suddenly you shut off your engines and the plane heads overboard by my mistake, you're going to go to your death, but I'll be going with you to mine. I have met very few people who believe that those in our capital or elected officials would actually stand in front of that plane for them, regardless of the consequences. I bring that up because I have, with every other Democrat, and I think moderate Republicans, honestly believe, no matter what, we must replace Mr. Trump. And that is necessary, but it's insufficient. If we do not have someone who people will trust once again, even when they disagree well, because they know he will be accountable to people above party, above self, above any special interest, there is no way we will unite America. And without a united America, there is no way at all we'll meet the defining challenges of our time. I've been throughout Iowa. I've lived 73 out of the last 88 days since I flew into Des Moines in an Econo-Lodge in Des Moines. Over 15,000 miles I've driven across this state. I've done over 220 events, including press interviews, including 13 parades, because in Iowa I learned, if one farmer grows more strawberries than the other farmer, they throw a parade. They're proud of it. And it's the best door-to-door you can do. My staff runs ahead of me, and with these two pictures here, they pass it out to everyone. And I run back and forth and shake every hand. And I say, that's me, retired Navy Admiral. Take me home tonight and read about me. 1 out of 4 Iowans say to me, thank you for your service. That's why the first event I did was at the Sullivan Brothers Museum. I actually had in my when I was a Commodore in my squadron, the ship name for the 5 Sullivan Brothers. The street that the Econo-Lodge is on is called, it's named after the very first man who was killed in World War I for America, from Iowa. A Pennsylvania boy from where I'm from died with him. And so there is a great respect I find as I go through the parades from Iowans for the military. But you know, I also noticed that when I went somewhere, that Radar O'Reilly was born here. And he, as you know, was in that great episode that showed you the folly of war. I bring that up because when I talk about accountability, what I mean by that is demonstrated by that youth on that aircraft carrier. But the lack of it has been demonstrated by those senators and congressmen and president all of whom, Democrat or Republican alike, voted for that tragic misadventure in Iraq. And they never understood that militaries stop problems. Militaries never can fix a problem. I don't think anybody here thinks we fixed Iraq. Those who voted for that war had little understanding of how that conflict would end before they voted to begin. We actually do need someone who has a breadth and depth of global experience that understands that we had fixed Iran, rid of it of nuclear warfare making capability, where they would have had 2 nuclear devices in 60 more days if we had not convened the world with the power of our diplomacy and economic sanctions and rid it of that. And now we're on the cusp. Having fixed Iran, I think our military might strike when we broke our word on a cord that had protected us. Too few people understand the limitations of our military power. Second, it also was something where I stepped into a third war when I came home. I had done the strikes against Afghanistan. I was told to do the precursor strikes against Iraq. I came home as a congressman and stepped into a war at home. Not of lives, of livelihoods. We had to keep our office, as that recession began, open to 9 o'clock every night, 7 days a week. We saved over 800 homes from foreclosure. We kept it open so much that we handled 4 times the constituency cases of the average congressional office. But there were senators and Republicans alike who, over time and across the spectrum, dismantled the wall. In the one place we definitely need a wall to keep greed out and accountability in. And when the inaptly named Wall Street was left unfettered, it destroyed my constituencies and millions of others' livelihoods. And then I tell people, 450 congressmen and senators have taken a lobbying job in the 20 years since they began that. Not one has yet accounted for themselves to be accountable, like that youth on that aircraft carrier, for either the carnage from that war, where we unleashed Shia against Sunni and ISIS came out of it, or for the carnage from dismantling the shackles that should have kept Wall Street in stride and not walking over my constituents. I am running because I honestly believe that accountability, the lack of it, is really where Mr. Trump is not the problem. He is the symptom of a problem. Where the biggest deficit in America today is the trust deficit. I am running more than anything to try to restore that trust by being accountable to all Americans, even when we disagree, well, as we did in my Republican district. With that, if I could, Eric, just take a couple questions, I'd be honored if there were. Thank you.
The one thing I was going to ask you about, since you've had this government experience, is we've got a president who basically said he is the foreign policy of this country, that he knows more than the generals and the diplomats, etc. And I guess you've advised the president. How would you contrast your style to the current president?
You listen. At the end of the day, when I was made, even as an admiral, I was paid for judgment. I wasn't an expert on the sonar system, but I knew how sonar kind of worked. And I knew that our carriers aren't safe, for example, in the Persian Gulf, because sonar doesn't work there. And we can't find the 19 mini submarines of Iran. So I know if we're going to do a strike, we better get the heck out of here and do it from a distance, which means the likelihood of it being successful easily is harsh. But as far as could we do it or not do it, and what's the milestones and all, and what is the outcome, you better listen. But it doesn't mean you're dictated to either. But you better listen. It's like what, and that basically is a lesson also for our politicians. In 2016, I walked 422 miles across Pennsylvania. I had felt the DNA of America's politics had changed. I was walking because I always remembered Scout in the book Kill a Mockingbird, where she quotes her father that says, "You can't know a man till you walk in his shoes, walk around in them." So I thought, you know, they no longer want to know about me. They want to know if I know what they're going through. And I think our party forgot that in 2016. Because halfway through that walk, the head senator called me and said, ran the Democratic Central Campaign Committee, stop walking, go back and fundraise. That's something that's actually out there in public. I'm not just saying that here. We had a serious disagreement, and I just kept walking. So, but, you know, I think we tend, that's why I spent the first 73 days living in a Econo Lodge to go everywhere. I'm not up on the air yet because people, you know, have to get to know me, and it's, you know, I have to break through that and begin to raise the funds and all to do that. But the issue here is, did you get to know the place? That's what I think is important. Question on any policy?
Well, listening is a good answer.
Listening is a good answer. For example, I just came from the other county, and I saw a doctor there. And we discussed all the rural hospitals that are closing. We've had over 100 close in this past year in America. So I asked him what he thought, because Medicare for All is going to be for-profit hospitals. What for-profit hospital is going to go into a rural county? Because they're all leaving the rural counties because they can't make a profit. As you know, 2/3 of the counties in Iowa have had decreasing populations since the 2010 census. And most of the others are stagnant, with only a couple of them growing. So the rural hospitals are closing. So I asked, he said, I don't know what the answer is, because for-profits won't stay there. The one where they are, he said, is having a tough time making it. I think the thing we do, I asked what it was, we should be for the public option. But I'm a big believer what the military teaches you. Excuse my language. Piss poor planning gives piss poor execution. So I call it a transition of choice. That people, you'll have two public option types in the basket of choices. And those that want to go in can. And we see if it provides better access, lower cost, better health care, as Medicare for All promises. And if it's working, then we can begin after a number of years to see if we can move more rapidly towards one of two ways. Maybe both. Medicare for All, where you keep the private hospitals that are also innovative. Johns Hopkins, University of Penn, for example. The other one, I believe, might be the model for the rural counties. The VHA system. Most people have this impression that the VHA, the VA health care system, has its problems. It does have problems. But the New England Journal of Medicine has rated that government-owned hospital system as equal to or better than any private provider or any public provider of healthcare in America on the 11 major indices. Rand Corporation just came out with another study a few years ago re-verifying that. So that could potentially be the model for rural counties, because without a hospital, how are you going to attract businesses? If you saw the recent article in Iowa to where they have these air helicopters to come in, you know, the medical things, it can cost you $36,000 to, if all of a sudden you have a problem, you got to quickly be airlifted. And you get stuck with that bill, despite paying that supposedly $8 a month in premiums. So that's where I think, you know, that's what I learned also going around here. Any others?
I'd like to go back to foreign policy.
Yes.
I'm curious about what you think that the long-term damage is going to be to American foreign policy, and specifically security policy, due to having a president that goes back on his word, that contradicts our foreign policy experts, that it's just, there's no coherent policy at all. I'm just wondering long-term effects with our allies who we rely on for intelligence and things like that, do you think we can recover from the damage that's happening right now?
The answer is we have no choice. Is it damaging? As I said on my announcement video, I have 5 videos. And in the first one summarizes the other 4. And one of those is called Restoring American Leadership. We have to. The sculpture that's closest to the Oval Office today is not of an American. It's a foreigner. And he is not there because he was the general with George Washington that fought the Revolutionary War and commanded French and American troops. He's there to remind the president that we not only won our freedom because of an ally who sent a general over, we cannot maintain it or enhance it without allies. The damage is not yet irrevocable, but it is close to it. We have left our bruised allies behind, kicking them and telling them it's a wrap, and coming home, thinking behind a wall we're going to become first. We were first and great out there when after World War II we convened what's often called the liberal world order. Why liberal? Not because of left liberal, because it was based on liberal values of democracy, open and fair markets, fair and just governments, individual and human rights, where we convened the world under our leadership, as you well asked the question, for the world's collective good. Because of that, after World War II, extreme poverty went from 63% of the world's population all the way down to 8% today. Literacy's gone from 42% of the world's population to 85%. That didn't just happen. We, imperfectly at times, like Iraq, convened the world in 20 democracies. After World War II, it was 20 democracies, now there's 90. They're decreasing again. But we convened them for the world's collective peace and prosperity. And the damage we have done is immense. And that's why you see someone like the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia high-fiving Putin on television, if you saw that. And that Crown Prince felt emboldened to murder an American resident in his embassy because he had no concern of consequences from a rules-based world order. One last example, if you don't mind. We are suffering here in Iowa, where we no longer sell our soybeans. But Ukraine does, taking our place. And the reason is, he treats it like it's a deal. Okay, here's this, I wake up in the morning, here's a new trade deal. No, the way to handle it is to convene the world under our leadership. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, those countries that were in it, that's 40% of the GDP of the world. And then you take the European Union and join them in it and say to the World Trade Organization, your rules aren't working well. We let China in. They're cheating. Here's the new rules. They're opaque. We don't know exactly what the state-owned institution is, where they give it subsidies against the rules, so we're going to lower the evidence rules. And they've got 60 days to comply with the whole world. 70 to 80% of the GDP says, China, you want to trade with us? You're not going to be able to go to Ukraine anymore for soybeans. It's all of us together. That's the damage he's done in simple words. I've been to 80 countries. They admired us. When I pulled into Egypt, and it was a friend, not an ally, and some of those Egyptian officers got on that ship with me before I went to the Gulf because we had to do some training. They wanted to watch how we did it. A young officer at the end said to me, and I was a young captain on my first ship at the time. As he left, he said, Captain, I have to tell you something. You treat your enlisted men as though they're equal to you. I said, they have due regard for rank. He said, that's not what I mean. You treat them as though they're equal human beings. We don't. The power of our ideals is immense, but our ability to convene the world. When I arrived in the Arabian Sea with my carrier battle group of 10 ships, there were 20 ships of an international model waiting for us. Japan to Germany to Italy. And the Italian Minister of Defense sent a message when he sent his ship over that said, "We are coming because America has been attacked." Wow, what are we losing by not convening the world? Thanks for the questions. First time I've had that.
I'm kind of a policy nerd, especially
And
the
the
foreign
problem is,
policy.
think about climate change.
Well, what we're creating the problem that are bringing people to our borders. I mean, what we've done, climate, and then what we've done by cutting programs that are meant to address those things, we're creating the problem and then acting like it's their fault. It's infuriating.
It is the migration, if this climate change keeps going, the migration issue is de minimis right now. It will be humongous. And you can see this on my announcement video. It's why Jim Mattis, the Secretary of Defense just left, is quoted as saying it is a immediate national security problem. But we have to keep in mind this. 194 of the 196 nations, including us, have not met the Paris Accord commitments. The tropics, let's take Saudi Arabia. You saw those oil facilities burning the other day after the strike? Well, it will use as much power, electricity, to power its air conditioning in 10 years as it exports in oil today. The tropics has 8% air conditioning. In 2050, 50% will have air conditioning. If they use the average air conditioning standard today, it's equivalent to deforesting 2/3 of the Amazon. If there's a time we have to convene this world, because that bomb's going to explode on us, and 85% of the damage is coming overseas, we need to bring them together.
Instead, we're just
Yes, sir.
To my mind, you're one of the few, if not the only, candidate that has talked compellingly about the consequences of the financial crisis. It's like it's history and we don't want to think about it anymore. But everything I see in terms of statistics, general consumer debt is rising. People are starting to use home equity again to borrow money. People are putting long-term money down on vehicles, just like they did prior to the financial crisis. And some of the recent events in the financial market the last couple of weeks have people comparing it to 2007. So I guess my question would be, based on your past history, what concerns do you have now with what's going on? And would you recommend any preemptive measures to be taken in order to avoid us getting into the same boat again?
The answer is yes. In the military, you learn to expect what you inspect. We have been peeling back what we are allowed to inspect. So last week, and I twittered about this, so that we all have it right. But they just had a vote, and they need 5 agencies to do it, of those SECs, the FDIC, to remove more oversight from the bill I voted for that made sure there was no bank too big to fail. And what happened is they wanted to simplify it for small businesses. They did that a couple years ago, and that was all right. This time, no, it wasn't simplification. Even Bloomberg News said it's blowing a hole in the Volcker rule, where now they are permitting commercial banks, not investment banks, commercial, where we put our money, where the pensions go, to gamble. Not with the people's money, but for the profit, not of the people, but of the bank itself. Worse is on the dark side, is still unregulated, of those kinds of crazy types of instruments that are in equity firms and other things, and they are not. That needs to go under the same purview as the others. We are on the cusp of a major problem, the trillions of dollars of debt that is out there. And already they're beginning to be downgraded, just as it was in the Great Recession. And our debt right now as I say on my town's website, is precarious. In 10 years, the debt will be, if we stay this course, 140 to 180% of our gross domestic product. That means the mortgage on our house is greater than the value of the house. We're underwater. Now, I have proposed some investments that are all paid for, $2 trillion, because we've got to get our infrastructure, not just roads, but we've got to fix this rural wireless issue here. I mean, it's bad in Pennsylvania and it's bad here. Who's going to be in a rural county when you can't even use your wireless, you know? And so, but that to roads, but it's paid for. And there's other things, but after those first 2 years of those investments, we have got to have a bipartisan agreement. And that's why I talk about it's got to be a united America somehow. We had it under John F. Kennedy, we had it under each president. Yeah, we disagreed, well, even Ronald Reagan. But the problem is, today, it's like this. That's why I'm proud of represented 2-to-1 Republican, nearly 2-to-1 Republican district. I was called the most productive congressman with 19 pieces of bipartisan legislation. Now those weren't like the health care plan. Of course I voted for it, that's why I ran. But it's the first movement of money into autism in 12 years. The first Elder Abuse Act, which is a closet disease, passed in 17 years. There's things that are harmful out there, but this big picture stuff is going to take us down again. And you know what? They still go into lobbying. Look, I got offered $6 and a $7-figure job because I was an admiral and a congressman. You know, I told my wife, I turned it down, and I think she jokingly, when she said it, she put her hand because, Joe, are you sure? I mean, she was joking, I think. But the issue is, I mean, one last example, if you don't mind, and I know, is half of Americans work in a small business. So I wanted to be on a third committee, you only get 2. But my district had lost 22% of its manufacturing small businesses the 10 years before I became congressman. So I wanted to be on a small business committee. And they said they not only approved the waiver, they asked if I wanted to be, without a vote, the vice chairman. I thought they wanted to show a sense of humor or something. No. Nobody wants to go to small business, despite all Americans work, half Americans work there, because there's no PAC money for small business committee. Everybody wants to go to appropriations. Everybody wants to go to energy, where the health care bills and all go, because that's where the PAC money goes. That's why 450 congressmen and senators, they're the ones that let Wall Street do what they did. And your point is, we have to end it. We do. We are a very precarious situation. I think I should probably stop. Wise words, if you don't mind, of John McCain, who used to call me because he's a fellow Naval Academy graduate. And when I was running for Senate, and he said every time, because he's always very short to the point as only John McCain can be, "Joe, saw you on television. You're still too long, keep it short." I thank you very much.
John McCain.